when he was young, going to do something, maybe I wouldn't know how to do the healthy shame. What I would do is just go pick him up and stop him, which is the seeds of the overfunctioning, right? That was sort of my main thing is I overfunctioned for him and I did everything for him because if I do everything for him, he won't screw up and I won't have to punish him, right? That's how that gets started. So, and all of that was as a reaction to all the unresolved toxic shame that I was holding. I just didn't want to pass that on. I didn't understand how to differentiate because none of it was healed in me.
Hey everyone, Irene Lyon here. Welcome to this video, to this channel, and to this entire world of healing trauma, nervous system health, and all things neuroplasticity. And today I have a very special guest for you. You just met on that little clip, Seth Lyon, my husband, a colleague, my partner in good crime. He is someone that you may have seen if you are on my YouTube channel asking questions. He is one of my helpers that answers the questions. He is also part of my program, Smart Body, Smart Mind. And I wanted to talk to him about shame, specifically the difference between healthy and toxic shame. I've spoken about these things in the past. I'm going to post all the other links below here because this short kind of interview clip is not everything, but it is a dive into two people, namely me and my husband, and how we had very different upbringings around this concept of shame. He shares some stories around his difficulty understanding healthy shame because of his toxic shame kind of upbringing and environment. And we just have a real open and honest conversation about this topic. I really recommend you watch till the end because even if, let's just say, you know that you didn't have this experience growing up, it is very possible that you either live with someone, you know someone, maybe you're married to someone. And then, of course, if you help people and if you're in the healing world or teaching worlds, you are going to come up against this. I can guarantee it. So lots of good information coming up. Have a listen. And like I said, be sure to check out the other links below this or near this so that you can learn more and understand just what this is all about and become really informed around this topic of shame. Hey everyone, Irene here. Just a quick note. When we recorded this, on my end, there was a lot of rain in the background where I was sitting, and I decided to keep the recording as is. We were on a roll. We were into some good conversation. Apologies for any inconvenience on the sound side, but that is what you might hear on my end towards the end of this video. Hey Seth, how's it going?
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
So, some people here know who you are because
Right.
they're involved in Smart Body, Smart Mind, 12-week online program that we run once a year, and you answer questions and do the pods, but you also answer questions in YouTube.
Yeah. 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 Moderate in there. And yeah. So I'm around a bit.
And you're my husband.
Yes.
We're married. You're downstairs from me right now.
Yep.
I wanted to do a small video on the concept of shame, toxic shame, healthy shame. I have, as you know, and as many people here who have been following me for a while, I've got some videos already on shame, the difference between healthy and toxic. I have a few articles. We'll put everything below
Yep.
for people. One of the hardest things for people to understand from what I have seen, and you probably have seen this through answering questions, people trying to understand that there is such a thing as healthy shame.
Yeah.
And you and I were brought up in two very different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not get any toxic shame. I had healthy shame, and I can give an example of that when we get into this chat.
Yeah.
You had the opposite.
Yeah. Lots of toxic shame, and I suppose it's possible there was some healthy shame thrown in there, but I don't. Yeah. The toxic stuff was so pervasive and intense that yeah, that's what left a mark. Yeah.
So I'm going to use an example of healthy shame. I'm going to share that with the audience. So for those that have heard this example, Bear with me. And then I want you to give me an example of what that would have looked like in your household. And then I want to unpack some of the misconceptions around this.
Yeah.
We're also going to plug in a video of an infant being shamed in a healthy way by their grandpa and show that. And then we can talk about that as well. So when I don't know how old I was maybe 8, 7, 6, I don't know. I was high enough, tall enough to cut bread at the kitchen counter, and we had this low counter that pulled out, so it was actually quite a short counter. I actually don't know if it was bread. I was cutting something, and I had the knife. Let's pretend this is the knife. And I was cutting with the knife facing my face.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a big no-no.
Big no-no. This might have been the first time I had cut anything like that. Who knows? My dad was sitting at the kitchen breakfast table, which was literally not even 10 feet away, and I heard this very loud, startling voice of his, which was, Irene, look at what you're doing. Turn the knife the other way. You could hurt yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you know my dad, and he's got that kind of calm, but he can,
Yeah, but he can
being a
be firm.
veterinarian, he knows how
Yeah,
to say no to a dog,
yeah,
stop, and it shook me, but I was like, okay, turn the knife the other way and started cutting. And even to this day, if I'm here in our kitchen cutting something and I'm rushing and I find myself doing something dangerous with the knife,
yeah,
it's not even a thought, it's a body-based visceral quality of, oh shoot, turn the knife the other way or get your fingers out of there.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna get hurt if I keep doing this. Yeah,
So if you were doing that in your home growing up as a kid, what would have happened?
yeah. So for me, I mean, it would have been something more along the lines of, Seth, that's totally unacceptable. That was my dad's favorite, unacceptable. I didn't get like the obvious stuff like, oh, you're a piece of shit or, you're horrible. It was just always usually that's unacceptable, but with this rage and no connection. And so the result was that I felt like I was unacceptable to him. And this happened, over and over and over and over and over and over about, so many things because, I was a curious, alive kid,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately my dad was, he very, everything must be certain way in a line, orderly, etc. So yeah, I had a lot of unacceptables thrown at me, and also yeah, different kinds of things. But that was one of the big ones. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
How about your mom?
It's very different. Yeah, I didn't really get that with my mom so much. My mom didn't do the shaming thing so much. She did some around like sexuality. Like later when I was a teenager, like I think she caught me with like a pornographic magazine, at some point, and was like, this is totally wrong, and you're degrading these women, and this is awful, and you know, I understand what she was saying, but she did it in a way where I felt like my sexuality was wrong. That there was
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with me having this desire, with having these, uncontrollable hormonal things that were going.
Impulses.
Yeah, it was like nothing I could do about it. It was that's a teenager.
Yeah.
So again, that it was very different. It was kind of softer, but it was like with this sort of just contempt, and again, no understanding, no attempt at connection, really.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little different flavor of it, but still, yeah,
Got it. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna plug in that video
yeah,
that I saw originally, and then you, I think, saw when we were in one of Peter Levine's master classes
yeah,
working with shame. And shame kind of comes in all the time when we're working in this somatic experiencing world for all sorts of reasons. But let's play that clip and then let's break down what's occurring in the body of that youngster.
mm-hmm,
And then we'll dive into kind of your struggles in
mm,
using healthy shame as a
yeah,
parent because you
yeah,
didn't get the healthy kind.
yeah.
All right, let's play the clip.
No, 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 Okay. Don't pull on it, okay? Huh? Yeah. Should set them things outside, shouldn't we? Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So, what is going on in there? I know, I
Yeah.
want you from someone who grew up with toxic shame, had a lot of that internal shame in their body, and has healed pretty much. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think most of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
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 So, what's going on there with the little one and grandpa?
Yeah, so the main thing that you want to see is first, like the tone from Grandpa. It's a lot like you're described with your dad, like very firm. There was no meanness. It wasn't excessively loud, right? It wasn't, but it was just firm. No, you know, and very clear, direct. And then you see the little one just sort of like it's like and this is what really is hard to explain to people is that healthy shame isn't something that the parent does. It's something that the child feels in their body. Like, so just like you, when you go to use a knife and you're doing it wrong, that somatic cue, right? It's in there, and you're like,
Uh-oh.
oh no, yeah, and that's the purpose of it, right? Is to like alert us somatically in like at the level of the impulse that we're like, oh, this is dangerous. It keeps us safe. So you saw that happen in that kid there. He went into that posture, and that's going to be a cue to him in future experiences that, oh, big thing up high, dangerous to pull towards me, right? And so that's
Totally.
that's and that's what you see happen. And then there's the connection, like the grandpa's still there. It's like, oh yeah, and he says like, oh yeah, like something
We
like,
shouldn't we
yeah,
shouldn't put those things there.
yeah, yeah. And so he's acknowledging that, oh yeah, it's not your fault. It's not, you're fine. We should have done something different. Just bringing in that connection and repair. So that's, just a beautiful example of it. Yeah.
And if for some reason someone's only hearing the audio of this and they couldn't see that video,
Mm,
try to find the video. I
yeah.
know most people watch through YouTube, but I know we're about to put some stuff onto podcast format. But in an essence, it's a pretty young one.
Yeah.
How old do you think that little one was?
Yeah. Two-ish
Is
around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not cognitive enough to understand really what's being said and that that's bad, but he or she had to get that visceral voice from grandpa
Yeah.
to say wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Dangerous.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the movement that went into him was this, and again, for those that can't see it, is this look of, oh, I've done something
Mhm.
wrong. And then the collapse of the spine, the
Yeah. The
head kind of
tail
goes
tuck.
down.
Yeah. Yeah. Head goes down.
And then that's when the grandfather, who is very attuned, clearly very regulated, and understands this, picks up, oh, little one is feeling this. I'm going to connect with them and
Mhm.
let them know we shouldn't put those things there. It's not your fault.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole messaging is it ends up being like that behavior is dangerous or, wrong in some way, but there's nothing wrong with you. Right? And that's the opposite of what I got. I didn't even really get the information that these actions were bad in any way. I just got that I'm bad. And then that gives into like rebellion. I'm going to do those things more, maybe, right? Like it's like a fighting against. So yeah, totally opposite. Yeah.
And we certainly don't see rebellion anywhere in the world right now, do
Yeah,
we?
yeah, right.
Uh, that's a joke, by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say another thing that is common that we hear in the shame world. I would say that Brené Brown has
Mm,
maybe
yeah.
popularized this, and I have not kept up with her work, so maybe she's shifted something in her discernment,
Mm,
her accuracy in this, but I'm not sure because she is not a somatic practitioner
right.
the way we are. So it's not, again, her fault. It's just I want to make this distinction because often when I say there is a healthy shame and a toxic shame, people will say, no, shame, all shame is bad.
Yeah,
What's happening around you've done something wrong is guilt.
yeah,
Guilt is you've done something wrong. Shame is I am wrong.
yeah.
Explain from your perspective the difference between guilt
Hmm.
and the shame pieces in
Yeah.
respect to the toxic and healthy.
Yeah. So the guilt is much more, and guilt is a mental thing. It's not in the body. Like anyone in the world can see a dog with its tail tucked between its legs, and they will say like that is shame. Like,
Hmm.
so it's
They
not,
know they've
they,
done, they've eaten all the food in the
yeah,
fridge.
yeah, they've knocked over mom's special plant, like whatever it is, right? And that's easily identifiable, and that's what we're talking about. It's postural, it's somatic, it's not mental. You're not you, that little one in the video isn't old enough to have guilt. Like you have to
Mhm.
have self-reflection and all those higher cognitive abilities online to participate with guilt. And guilt's not useful. Like guilt's, and mental. So
Mhm.
it's very different from that powerful sort of somatic imprinting of this is a behavior that's dangerous. Right?
100%.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your parenting when you were raising your
Mm.
kiddo
Well,
and some of the tug of wars that you and I may have had.
yeah. Well,
Just put you on the spot there.
yeah. Well, my son lived with us for 2 years, so in the
Yeah.
teenage years, right? And there was, I was with him up until age 3 continuously, and then there was a little break, and then I was with him till about age 7, and then there was a pretty long break where I wasn't with him regularly. I would just see him, a couple times a year. I'd see him for a few months in the summer, or see him on Christmas, but he wasn't with us, like me again, until I was with you regularly until
Hmm.
he was 16. So, a teenager, sort of past the point of being able to, establish those solid foundations. And so we experienced the result of a lot of things that I screwed up early on, which were about largely not disciplining. And because I had experienced such awful, yeah,
It was so
really,
swing. It was end of the spectrum that was
yeah, like it was so
abusive.
bad and abusive what I got. And so I thought discipline was that. So I was on the other side. And, so I didn't do any of those things. And including, when he was young, going to do something, maybe I wouldn't know how to do the healthy shame. What I would do is just go pick him up and stop him, which is the seeds of the overfunctioning, right? That was sort of my main thing is I overfunctioned for him and I did everything for him because if I do everything for him, he won't screw up and I won't have to punish him, right? That's how that gets started. So,
Yep.
and all of that was as a reaction to all the unresolved toxic shame that I was holding. I just didn't want to pass that on. I didn't understand how to differentiate because none of it was healed in me. So that, yeah, when that led to some real struggles between us when he was living with us, because you had the healthy, upbringing and responsibility and, all of those
Chores.
chores, all of those things that were very sort of solid and instilled. And I didn't know how to do that. So it would drive you
Hmm.
crazy, right? Because you're like, no, he should be doing that and following through. And, you know, so, I tried my best, but again, it was kind of late. I mean, luckily he's a really great guy. So
No, he's alive. He's well. He's a good kid.
yeah,
Good
yeah,
young adult.
good
I
guy.
kind of
Yeah.
remember. I don't know when this was, but like, I don't know if it was taking out garbage or has some. It's always was about
Mm,
cleaning up stuff, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And you you said something, or you like had to process some massive deep stuff
mm-hmm.
when you asked him to do something
Yeah,
that was seemingly something a 17-year-old, in my opinion, should just know how to do naturally.
that's right. Yeah, it was like
And it was
death.
like
It was
death
like,
for you.
yeah, yeah, no, it was so intense to like literally like to ask like Jay, you gotta do this, to really go in with like firmness and discipline and you didn't do the thing and I need you to do the thing. Like, yeah, it was so hard. I mean, it was so hard. It literally felt like I was, yeah, confronting death, and it was gonna kill me or destroy the relationship, essentially. Yeah, that's so.
So, in one of those things, because there's no doubt people listening to this who fall into your boat
Mm-hmm.
as parents,
Yeah.
maybe so there's sort of, there's a few scenarios. There's the person who is like, oh my God, that's why my kid can't figure anything out. They can't open a bank account. They don't know how to clean their house. I have to keep, I've got to hire a cleaner. So there's that situation. And then there's a situation where someone might be in it right now with a toddler or a 6-year-old. And
Yeah.
then, of course, there's the people listening to this that maybe they haven't had their kids yet.
Hmm.
And they're like, oh God,
Hmm.
that's me. What can I do to help heal this? Could you go through those 3 different pieces into what your suggestions would be from that parental point of view, and of
Mm.
course as a somatic trauma
Yeah, yeah.
practitioner?
Well, I'll start with the last one first. So if you haven't had kids, do your trauma work before you have kids, please.
Please, please.
Please, for humanity.
We want
It's,
to retire at some
yeah,
point.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no substitute for resolving your stuff before you go to create another human. And I mean, some of it you may not be able to get at until you have the child, because and that's the one thing about kids is when you have a kid, anything in you that boom, yeah, that's left over that you haven't touched from your childhood, it's gonna be right in your
It's going
face.
to come up.
Yeah, but you can do so much of that work beforehand if you do this work. If you see a somatic practitioner or start with Irene's online courses or free resources, like learn about the work, start practicing it, and do this work of resolving your trauma first as much as possible, and you'll go into it just with such more solid foundations, and understanding the ability to you know do this action if necessary, which is essentially protective of healthy shame. It's about protecting your kid, right, from doing stuff that's dangerous. So yeah, that's for if you haven't had kids.
I want to add one more thing in. Let's just say someone, because we get this sometimes too, I'm pregnant right now, I'm about to have a child or
Mm,
something like that. And let's just say that person does have a spouse. You can do a lot of healing work with your spouse
yeah,
around asking for what you need in the house. Maybe you
yeah.
live with someone who's a slob, or maybe you live with someone who's the opposite in OCD, and you got to find that balance
Mm,
and practice asking for help, asking, because that's something I
yeah,
had to learn,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right? Was
yeah,
asking for help, being lazy. Like it was a big deal for me to like
yeah,
leave dishes in the dish in the sink,
yeah, 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 yeah,
right? Like I'd stay up till 1 in the morning cleaning everything because I like having a clean kitchen in the morning,
yeah,
but sometimes it's like, okay, I'm gonna leave it and I'm gonna be fine.
yeah, totally. That
And
took a
that's
while
my
for you.
little
Yeah,
thing anyway.
yeah, yeah. Whereas like I'm gonna just rest and stay in bed for a little bit extra, and yeah, all those
We're still
ways.
working on that one.
Yeah, I'm still working on that one. So, well, that brings up a really good point too of the importance of doing the trauma work before you have children, is because that is a very good opportunity to see if you're actually on the same page with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, if you go into that and like say one person is like, "Oh yeah, I really need to do this," and the others, "No way, I'm not doing that." Well,
Yep.
big red flag. Get out of
Yeah.
that before you
Thanks.
have the kids, right? Because both parents need to be aligned in this if there's unresolved trauma in the field. It can't, if just one person is focusing on it and working on themselves, the other's not, it does not work. And that gets way, way, way worse once a kid's involved. So another reason to, yeah, do it now, with your partner, or maybe your partner is totally fine and regulated. If one of those, 0.01% of people on the planet who are like that, then great, but otherwise, yeah, like get on the same page with doing this work of healing the old stuff. So,
And I want to add to that, because if a child is brought up in an environment where the 2 primary caregivers, or even if it's a mother and her and say the grandma that's the other
mm,
allo parent, for example, if those 2 aren't in alignment, little baby and
yeah,
little infant and little toddler is going to get confusing mixed messages. And then that kiddo has to change themselves when
yeah,
they're with mom versus when they're with grandma versus when they're with dad. And I know you got that having parents that were
yeah,
split.
yep, yep,
And that is highly anxiety, stress, survival stress producing
oh
for a
yeah,
growing, developing human.
yep, yeah. I had to learn super early on how to feel what was in the field of the house and shape myself appropriately to avoid danger. and that was totally different at each house. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it created for me this tendency to either be totally hypervigilant on guard or totally collapsed into freeze and just shut down, because those were the two different kind of realities that I was navigating. So absolutely, yeah, yeah, so
Okay, let's
important.
go to that next scenario, which,
So
because we
yeah,
covered the before having kids, we covered pregnant,
yeah,
not yet, but almost. The next one would be, okay, you're a parent now and you realize, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm doing everything for my child.
yeah,
Even if they know how to tie their shoelaces, I'm still doing that for them. I'm still dressing them in the morning.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that is never. Well, it's usually not too late. I mean, I think once a kid gets into late teenage years, that's the point at which I say, like, okay, instead of doing a college fund, do a therapy fund. And, when they're ready to work on their stuff, you can support them, because at that point, it's kind of too late. They need to be individuated. They need to be themselves. They need to, unless it's a very rare person, that teenager is not going to be open to correction at this point. But
Mm-mm.
if you're still talking, within the first 10, 11, 12 years, like there's so much room for correction and repair and change. And if you have a young one and you're realizing, oh my gosh, I'm doing everything for them, I'm not setting boundaries, I'm not saying no, then it's time to really look at that and confront how uncomfortable it makes you feel to do those things. And that's going to mean, doing your own trauma work. It's like you can try implementing the correct behaviors, and that's a start. But in order to have that an effective, delivery, you need to be in alignment with that yourself and have resolved the things that are making those things so uncomfortable for you. So yeah, I think overfunctioning is a huge one that we see a lot of, and just doing everything for the kid. It's so damaging. So it's yeah, like let them struggle, let them struggle, let them go through that discomfort of trying to figure something out and failing. It's so
Yeah.
important. And then
Yeah.
if they ask for help, then you go in and help, and you do it with them. You don't do it for them, right? So, you
Teach them.
you teach
Teach them.
them. Yeah, teach them how to do it for themselves. Yeah, and I think up to early teenagehood, working on your own trauma is going to be still very effective. Implementing change can happen. All of those things can be really useful. All the way
hmm
up until I don't know. I'd say 12, 13, and then after that, you're kind of getting
It's
into
that puberty. It's when
yeah,
the hormones start to kick in and they create a human that's more mature and able to childbear. It's like well, we
yeah,
know obviously something shifts
yeah.
in the chemical makeup, the endocrine hormonal
Yeah.
excretions.
Yeah, and at
And
that point, patterns that are set
yeah,
until they choose to change it themselves.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then I will say, like, let's just say you're in that situation where you have teenagers and you're listening to this and you're like, oh wow, you know, I think it's important from what I've learned through some of our mentors like Steve Terrell, Kain, to actually acknowledge I screwed up.
Yeah.
And that takes some courage, I think.
I,
I'm not a
yeah.
parent, but my sense is
No,
it
I
would
did
take a
that.
lot.
Yeah, I did that with my son. I had to at some point have this conversation with him where I said, "Look, I messed up. I did way too much for
Mm,
you, and I didn't have this discipline, and I want to acknowledge that. I understand it's affecting you, because we started having conversations about difficulties that he was having, and I knew it was a lot of it was because of things that I had not done. In his case, it was more, yeah, things I hadn't done rather than things I had done.
yeah,
So hadn't let him struggle, hadn't let him figure it out. All of
yeah.
those things, hadn't imposed discipline and boundaries and chores and all of those good things that sort of teach a little human how to be responsible and complete a task and follow through and organize
hmm
their time and all of these things.
I want to add one thing in because sometimes this will be a confusion for people is we have to differentiate the difference between infancy and a young toddler that's old
Mm.
enough to like carry a cup to the dishwasher,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
right? And by that I mean there's crying because you've just been told to clean up your room and you don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's crying because you're 6 month old, you're a
Right.
6 month old and you're hungry, or you have gas in your belly,
Yeah.
or you have a fever.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, yeah, so important. 'Cause, I mean, there is a genuine period of time where we do have to do everything. Like,
Haha.
and we're supposed to, right? So yeah, up until really like that what you said is a good point, like a good dividing line. Like when they're walking, they can carry things, they can start doing stuff with their limbs and
Yeah.
hands.
Bring mommy the towel and I'll
Yeah,
fold it. And then they
ex-
watch.
exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
that's when you start that process of mentorship and instruction, I think. Yeah.
Cool. And I wanted to just really make that distinction because then there's this thought, okay, well, we'll just leave our babies to cry and
Yeah, yeah.
won't
No, no.
take. And that's different, everybody.
Totally different. Yeah.
I've done some videos on that. That's where
Yeah.
you do need to pick them up as soon as they cry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's just a key in differentiating between a baby who they cry to alert you to a need. It's
Hmm.
not because they're having an emotional experience. Versus when you get older and you've done, say, a good job of that attunement process and teaching your infant what emotions are through the mirroring and all of that, and they start to have an inner life of emotions that make sense to them,
Yeah,
right? Then it's a different thing. Absolutely.
different story.
Different
Okay,
story.
what was the other scenario I had? Was it
Well, we kind of
adult
already did it, but
children?
yeah, adult children, and you know you screwed up, and it's too late, and that's where you work on yourself. And I have seen time and time again that when an adult works on themselves, even when the kids are grown, it creates a very real change in the field. Now, it may not always ripple out to the change behavior and the inner reality of the grown child, but it does change how one as a parent responds to that dynamic. So it's never too late to do your own work, and that does have a very real effect on the field of the relationship, and it sort of opens the door for your adult child to then change themselves. And
Yeah.
sometimes I've seen it happen like mysteriously, like they don't know why they're doing something different, but they're doing something different, and so yeah, it does have a positive effect.
Yeah, I even remember someone, I can't remember if this was a comment in one of our forums or if it was a client when I was still working in private practice, but it was one of our students who is obviously an adult changing and healing their stuff. And they didn't tell their family what they
Right.
were doing, which we suggest you don't have to tell anybody that you're doing this. And I think it was the mother shifted something so dramatically that it shocked our client, our student.
Mm.
I think the mother like showed up with food
Yeah.
as a gesture of something, which was so insane because that's not
Mhm.
something that they would ever have done, and it was welcoming and thank you so much. And our student had never told mom what they were doing,
Right.
and it just shows how this can ripple out if the people on the other side or within that family system are open.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen that many times. Like I have a client, same kind of thing. And this, yeah, in these cases we're talking about it's the kids that are doing the work and the parents are
Yeah.
changing, but it works both ways.
Yeah.
Like I had a client who, everything about their mom was bad and negative and painful, and over the course after a couple of years of work, now what happened is spontaneous memories of good experiences with her mom started
Oh
arising.
wow.
And then concurrently, her mom totally changed in her behavior towards the daughter, like was much more kind. How are
Hmm.
you doing?
Hmm.
Reaching out. So, I mean, it was just so beautiful to see. And it really does show, like, wow, the power of this work. It's enters into the quantum field, and
The field.
it has a very real effect. Yeah.
So to wrap this up, of course, the $1 million question, the holy grail is, so how do I heal my shame,
Mm,
and we won't go into all the details because that's like
yeah.
a lifetime of work, and I don't say that to scare people. Um,
Well, yeah, it took me, about 7 years or so. So maybe not a
yeah,
full lifetime, but it takes years. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's not because it's not just one thing. The toxic shame is just a piece of it. You're talking about healing a dysregulated system, but that can be a big piece. Yeah. Yeah.
What would be knowing the resources that we have access to that are out in from obviously my
Mm.
courses and that, what would be your suggestion for someone who falls along these spectrums, the first thing that they start doing?
Hmm. I think education is the first most important piece. Like, so I mean, if you're watching this video, that's a great start. I would say go watch your video on disgust, as
Yes.
the gateway emotion for healing toxic shame, because that is one of the most important pieces in doing this work. And then you just start. I mean, I'm biased, of course, but I think your programs are the best way to start because they lay such a solid foundation. And I think there's also tremendous benefit in one-on work with a practitioner. It's just not everyone can find one, and if they find one, they may not be good, as we've seen many, many times. So
Unfortunately, yeah.
if you get a solid education and basic practices online first, then you're way more informed about what to find in a practitioner, and you'll know like, oh, this person doesn't really know what they're doing. So that's my suggestion: education, and then start practicing. If you have access to a good practitioner, then do that. If you don't, then check out Irene's program, the 21-day tune-up, and yeah, that's just start. But understanding what's happening through the education is so important. To like, why do I feel this way? Why is my gut in knots? Why is my posture so collapsed? Understand like, oh, that's a result of this toxic kind of shame being held in me. So it's not just something that's out of the blue. It has a reason. So knowing
Mhm.
thyself, right? Know thyself.
Totally. And for those of you listening, watching, I did do a video a while ago on how to find a good somatic practitioner.
That's right. Yeah.
Because a lot of times we have folks asking, do you know anybody in Toronto, anybody in Berlin? And of course, we don't know all the people in the world. That would be impossible to do this work. So, as you, the consumer, because that's what you are, you, the person searching for a practitioner, if you want to go that route, watch that video
Yeah.
and take it seriously and interview your future people,
Hmm.
because you'll know really quickly if someone has the skills to work at the level you may want to work at now that you've learned about this material, this concept of toxic shame, healthy shame at this visceral level. I don't think a person has to understand all the distinctions that we've just talked about, but I think that they should be open to learning about it.
Yeah.
Because if they don't agree that there is such a thing as healthy shame, you will have a struggle. Most likely, I'm being very general, but you most likely will have a struggle with that practitioner.
Hmm.
I know that even one of our colleagues didn't love the concept of healthy shame, and she wanted to call it, I think it was
Right. Right.
compassionate correction. And she's actually swung back to, you're right, it's healthy shame.
Yeah.
Because in that moment when my dad was like, Irene, with the strong baritone voice, there wasn't a lot of compassion in that.
No, it wasn't like, oh, honey,
Oh, honey, can you
you're doing,
stop doing
yeah,
that?
now let me show you what you're doing wrong here. No, no, it's shame. It's and there's no other word for it. And like, yeah, compassionate correction is talking about what the person is doing again, which isn't not what we're talking about. Is what happens in the little one's body, and that needs to be that postural sort of collapse, the
Visceral.
feeling of like, oh, and then the repair and the connection, and you're a good person, and I love you, and all of that
Yeah,
stuff.
let's do it together. Let's do this,
Yeah.
and let's cut another piece of bread and figure it out. And the piece with that I wanted to mention um, is, oh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, that's what it was. When you get it right,
Mm.
you don't have to do it again.
Right.
And this is a thing that I see a lot of parents struggle with. They just don't listen. They don't why aren't they listening? They must have a learning disability. They don't care. They're lazy. But my experience is that when it is very clear and very stern with the connection and the love and the right from wrong, you don't need to have that lesson over and over again because it does get somatically implanted.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Do it right, and then you don't have to keep on doing it over and over again. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Save yourself some energy, folks. Learn about healthy shame,
Yeah, totally.
or
Yeah,
learn how to experience it in
yeah,
that way.
yeah, yeah.
Anything else, Seth, that you want to add before we end?
I think that's good. Yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
a good stopping place. I think, and we could go, there's so many tangents we could take, but, might as well keep this focus just on this. And yeah. One thing I just thought of, just popped into my head, one very simple thing a person can do on their own if they want to start exploring, like if they have a lot of the toxic shame in them, just start paying attention to your posture. That's one thing you can start playing with. And like, if you notice you're collapsed, like see what it's like to explore, like, oh,
Power pose.
yeah, power pose, or like sitting and tilting the pelvis, and, playing with these different dynamics that bring you into different postural settings. And if you're feeling like really bad and you're feeling like, ugh, what is it like to like extend, and yeah, put your hands on your hips and stand up and extend the chest, and, have everything a bit more up, and just notice, what does that change emotionally? You may be surprised, because it is so connected to posture. So yeah, that's a good simple thing that people can start playing with.
And that's why I think a lot of somatic practices have kind of bubbled up, like yoga, for
Mm,
example. Um, the key, though, is understanding that going into those postures, we want to do that with awareness and understanding of what might be coming up. But if it's just forcing yourself into
yeah,
extension
yeah, yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
strain,
Oh yeah.
you're going to miss the mark, right?
Well, and that's the danger with a lot of the yoga practices, is they go into postures that can trigger all sorts of held somatic stuff. And if you don't know that, and you don't understand that, and you're not prepared for that, you can either end up sort of shutting down, or you can have a big blow up and huge emotional, explosion, and you don't know why. So yeah, it can be some of those kinds of movement and, things that are, especially in a big group class and just everyone do this thing, they can be real problematic if you've got unresolved trauma. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. See you upstairs.